Conrad Rocha. And I met here in Tulsa at a winter talk. I would have given anything to have met him at least 10 years earlier. Over those 10 years, I'd been working on the Doctrine of Discovery, and I could say that I had no grasp at all when I got into it, how legal it is. I think the theology always surprised me, but I never realized how deeply legal the church system is. Yes. And if church isn't anything else, boy, it doesn't have a legal system to itself, from church documents and laws and legislations and everything we put together. But a big piece of it was also, as far as the doctrine itself goes, is military law and how that gets in. And the documents that are out there are just oppressive when we look at that. And so ever since I've known Conrad, that at least that legal piece has always been a helpful piece of my life, and being able to have somebody to go back to and to be able to, especially run the Supreme Court documents through, and over the years in the book group, to be able to do that and have Conrad's voice there has been great. And yet, though I deeply appreciate Conrad for knowledge of law, it ain't what I love him for. Brother Conrad has an instinctive grasp of creation's indigeneity, where I learned Goma from Crow, this idea of all my relations, the fullness of creation, and the fullness of how that goes from there, I got from Conrad. I use the word kin and kinship a lot. I learned from Conrad the distance to that. I learned from Conrad siblingship, that there is no distance. That kin, I love it. I love the language, but I also am one that I've settled into. The language needs to change. Because kinship's over there. There's always a distance between me and my kin. Conrad has taught me siblingship, that those old terms and those traditional terms that we just have to use them differently and find new ways, but it's my siblings. My siblings who are in the room, my siblings who are rocks, my siblings who are plants, my siblings who are animals. That is it. I've watched and experienced Conrad do this through his relationship with three sisters. That it is in his garden that certainly there is vine and stem and stalk that become entangled with one another. Yet the siblingship of Conrad shifts us from being relatives to an Eucharistic grace where borders and boundaries vanish. With that, I invite Conrad and love to introduce you to Conrad for this time.
I think somebody else should get up here. That wasn't me. No.
I want Dave to introduce me. I want him to write my name.
Who is that person? So, recording.
Still on.
So I begin with, who the heck is Conrad? My maternal lineage has lived in New Mexico long before the Europeans invaded our part of God's world, for at least 400 years. I'm a fifth generation Presbyterian. At a very early age in my life, my grandfather told me that I was not Hispanic, but I didn't understand why he said I wasn't Hispanic. Later, I realized that the conquistadores who came to our part of God's world came unaccompanied by women. Yet they had children. And many of their descendants still claim that they are direct, pure descendants of the Spanish, thus Hispanics. The reality, as my grandfather saw it, and as I've come to understand it, was that indigenous women bore their children. So we're mestizo, mixed blood. And that's how I identify it. Although it's not on any kind of paperwork where I can write mestizo. Likewise, my father, who came to the US when he was 1 year old in 1925, and was certainly of mixed blood, as his family was of the lower class within Mexico. And those were the indigenous and mixed blood people. At the time, the southern border was still relatively open. Mexicans were specifically excluded from the immigration quotas of 1921 and 1924 that radically reduced immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. Convinced that cheap Mexican laborers were indispensable to Southwestern agriculture, Congress imposed no limit on immigration from the Western Hemisphere, though it did establish a protocol, a patrol along the Mexican border and imposed an $8 head tax and a $10 visa tax fee. In 1929, the federal government required Mexicans to obtain visas in order to enter the United States. During the late 1920s, professional labor contractors and border crossing experts helped immigrants avoid the head tax and the expense of a visa and bureaucratic delays at the border. As my brother would say. In this speech delivered in the House of Representatives in 1928, Congressman John Box calls for restrictions on Mexican immigration. And listen to the language, Crow Eddie, listen to the language that they use. Another purpose of the immigration, I quote, another purpose of the immigration laws is the protection of American racial stock from further degradation or change through mongrelization. The Mexican peon is a mixture of Mediterranean-blooded Spanish peasant with low-grade Indians who did not fight to extinction, but submitted and multiplied as serfs. Into that was fused much Negro slave blood. This blend of low-grade Spaniard, peonized Indian, and Negro slave mixes with Negroes, mulattoes, and other mongrels, and some sorry whites already here. It's in the US Congress. The prevention of such mongrelization and the degradation it causes is one of the purposes of our laws, which the admission of these people will tend to defeat. To keep out the illiterate and the diseased is another essential part of the nation's immigration policy. Does that not sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
The Mexican peons are illiterate and ignorant. Because of their unsanitary habits and living conditions and their vices, they are especially subject to smallpox, venereal diseases, tuberculosis, and other dangerous contagions. Their admission is inconsistent with this phase of our policy. The protection of American society against the importation of crime and pauperism is yet another object of these laws. Few, if any, other immigrants have brought us so large a proportion of criminals and paupers as have the Mexican peons. Note the language. Peons, low-grade Indians, serfs, mongrelization, illiterate, ignorant. All very familiar terms today.
Yes.
At any rate, as a youngster growing up in the lowest income neighborhood in Albuquerque at the time, in the 1950s, the very early 1950s.
Lori's late. I'm the late 50s.
I experienced the white folk attempt to assimilate us. In my elementary school, where the school principal, Mrs. Candelaria, the sister of my pastor in my home church, a Spanish-speaking congregation, actually punished me one day with a paddle for speaking Spanish on the school grounds during recess. Yet in church, I was encouraged with her sitting there to worship God and be fluent in my language, Spanish. Talk about confusion for this little kid. My grandfather, as all grandfathers in our cultures, taught me orally many lessons and committed our family history to a written record written in Spanish. When he was dying, he gave it to me. And he said I could do whatever I wanted with that history, except translate it.
Wow.
He said if his descendants wanted to know their history, they needed to be able to speak and read Spanish, as it carried with it our culture. How we spoke to one another, how we treated one another, how we interacted with our elders, and how it carried connotations in the use of language of respect when used properly. My grandfather also fought the incursion of the Model Cities program of the 1960s, and he won that battle. Go Gramps. When the government wanted to come in and fix our homes, Gramps knew that over time, many would end up losing their homes to gentrification, as they could not manage mortgages that were theirs and had been passed down many generations. Neighboring Mexican, Mestizo, Hispanic neighborhoods availed themselves of model cities, and now none of the original families live there anymore. But in Martinez Town, where I grew up, many of our family members and their descendants, including my own close family members, still live in the homes built by their ancestors. My father and his mother and siblings eventually, by the way, became naturalized citizens. I have, as I have grown, had to struggle with being a descendant of both the oppressor and the oppressed. It's a strange place to be. More recently, I have found that wherever I go, even in Albuquerque, I carry these documents everywhere, even in the city. My passport card, my global entry card, my real ID, and my birth certificate. I carry these with me. We've lived here 400 years and I have to carry these with me.
Shame.
And now what I've learned from this experience is truly how my indigenous siblings feel when they are stopped and have to show proof of their legitimacy to be here. When they have been here, not for hundreds of years, but for thousands of years. In the PCUSA, I have watched the church evolve in its relationship to and with its indigenous siblings here in the US and throughout the world. We have gone from having missionaries to having mission co-workers. And even that is evolving today as the church restructures. I've experienced our General Assembly up close, serving as the platform manager and member of the Assembly platform staff from 1999 through 2018. 8 General Assemblies, 12 General Assemblies, and having served as a corresponding member from 2010 through the present of the Assembly. In 2016, the 222nd General Assembly, the PCUSA acted to call the church to confess its complicity in and repudiate the doctrine of discovery. 2 years prior to that, we had been encouraged to engage in a study denomination-wide of the doctrine of discovery. And that's how I first became aware of it and sought to learn about it. Yet the following year, 2017, I experienced the church at its non-general assembly year in 2017 host an event called the Big Tent, which provided an opportunity to discuss issues of import in society and the church without having to deal with legislation. At that event, they hosted a time for the marginalized of our church to speak to how they were experiencing the church. It included speakers and a panel of Asian, Hispanic, Black, and LGBTQIA persons, but no Native American voice. I was incensed. And they were like, oh, yeah. A year after we disavowed, repudiated the doctrine of discovery. What the hell is wrong with you people? So my vow, entering my fifth term, my third 5-year term as the servant leader of one of our denomination's regional councils, the Synod of the Southwest, I vowed that I would accept the re-election, provided I could spend the greatest part of my time and energy championing the cause of and assisting the Synod and being an ally to my Indigenous siblings in the Southwest and whenever possible beyond. I worked to empower the Synod's Native American Ministries Coordinating Committee such that during my tenure, we have with the financial and logistical assistance of the Synod and the PCUSA General Assembly hosted 3 triennial Native American leadership gatherings at the direction of the NAMCC, that's what we call it, shorter. These gatherings were monocultural. These gatherings of Native Americans leaders, which were self-selected, included church elders from each of the 26 Native American churches and chapels in the bounds of the Synod of the Southwest. As I said, it's a monocultural event. So non-natives are not invited to attend, not even me. Though I am there and my Synod colleague with me, we're present to handle issues of logistics, but we do not enter the room. This was not my choice, but my Native American siblings' choice. If they believed they could speak freely and in love to one another without being concerned how the white folk would react if they were present, or how the Native American folk might not be open to freely discussing their issues in front of the white man. Some of my non-native siblings have taken issue with this, but I remind them that this is a Native American leadership gathering. It's their choice, not mine, not theirs. The last one we held also included about 75 youth to be full participants in this event. Until then, they always came and sang and that kind of stuff. Just 2 energizers. A bunch of old trip. Anyway, this one they were invited to be full participants. So it was our first cross-generational gathering. It's been successful in identifying the needs and concerns of our Indigenous siblings. Out of each one have come recommendations communicated to the Synod and its various committees and to seek ways to address and, if possible, implement those recommendations. In response to one recommendation several years ago, there was a desire to learn about my favorite subject, PCUSA polity. I love it. So we created and funded a Native American Theo Academy, which has resulted in more Native American folk willing and eager to serve as deacons and elders in their local congregations, knowing what it means to do so. and it's taught them how to navigate the white church's system of governance. This has been ongoing for over 7 years, and it is taught by Native American pastors to Native American people. No whites allowed. That feels kind of good. No offense.
It's great.
In 2020 or so, I attended my first winter talk. And afterwards, I was invited by David to engage in a book study on the doctrine of discovery, its effect on our indigenous siblings. Our first book was an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. Wow. I think David meant that this was to be a one and done kind of thing. Yet here we are 6 years later, meeting almost every week to study and discuss other books about Indigenous culture, connection to place, and creation. So I thank the CIM for this gift. And I thank David.
He deserves it.
As was stated yesterday, we need to look to the past to move into the future. I've often called this group the place where Conrad has become radicalized.
All right. It's a movie.
But not in a negative sense, but in a sense of radically changing my thought about creation, my neighbor, myself, and my relationship with God. Frankly, in large part due to this study group, I have come to claim myself as a follower of the way of Jesus and not a Christian. Why? Because the term Christian, notably in these times especially, but actually throughout our history, as what was a radical movement, has been bastardized, has resulted in great harm to our fellow human beings and God's creation. Sure, the people I serve, if I said I wasn't a Christian, they'd probably get a little freaked out. I say, careful who I say it to. Whenever I serve as a liturgist in my local congregation or preach outside my local congregation, I use the Indigenous translation of the New Testament. It's quite popular within the Synod of the Southwest, and I was glad to see it night before last. And we even the Synod purchased 500 copies.
Wow.
We've distributed most of them free of charge, occasionally for cost, depending on the circumstances and the audience. Another action of the PCUSA General Assembly, the 225th 2020 virtual assembly, because of COVID, was that only essential business for the administration of the church would be considered. All other business would be forwarded to the 226th General Assembly. But knowing the system, I helped the commissioner from the Presbytery of Santa Fe, who was a Native American, to take a piece of business off the consent agenda that was to be sent to the 226th General Assembly and consider it at this virtual General Assembly. The item related to the restoration of Native churches throughout the denomination after a survey of the condition of all the churches had been made. It was estimated the cost of bringing these churches back to full and safe use would cost about $11 million. And we were concerned that if we waited another 2 years, that price tag would go up. And then we'd have to implement it and blah, blah, blah. And so you lose track. This GA was to receive the report and to create a funding mechanism through the PCUSA Foundation to raise the money to do that. It was taken off the table, and it was passed by unanimous voice consent. This was the only business lifted off of the motion to refer all business to the next General Assembly. So when you know what you're doing, you got a good reason to do it, we can do it. I also note that at the virtual assembly, another great thing that happened at the assembly was that they were to elect co-moderators of the assembly. And it was at this assembly that we elected the first Native American co-moderator of the General Assembly, ruling elder Alona Street Stewart, from the Synod of Lakes and Prairies, which includes the state of Minnesota. And she's an enrolled member of the Delaware, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Nanticoke tribe. The response to the action of the General Assembly, of which I spoke, was included encouraging all councils of our church, when they sold property, to send a portion of their proceeds to these funds. Yet each time I would learn that a council was struggling about how to divide the proceeds from sales and other unrestricted gifts, I would remind them of the action of their General Assembly passed unanimously. And often the response was, oh yeah, but we don't have any Indigenous folks in our area. So it's not at the forefront of our minds. And my response has always been, but your church or churches are on their land, stolen from them by us. Still don't get it. So there remains much work to be done. Still we all work within the wide ecosystem of the church. And I applaud the disciples for creating and encouraging the Center for Indigenous Ministries, which is part of, yet I gather, sort of independent from the regular church. Something the PCUSA has not yet figured out, and I sure wish the hell it would. Two more of things of note that have occurred within the Synod of the Southwest. In 2022, I hosted 12 Synod executives of the 13 we have in our denomination to engage in a Native American experience, visiting 16 Native and churches and chapels from the northernmost part of the Synod in northern Arizona to the southernmost part of the Synod in southern Arizona, and to western New Mexico over a 5-day period. It's the first time the Synod execs have ever taken that much time out of their personal time to engage in this kind of an experience. Talking about yesterday about experiences.
Yes.
This is how you do it, I think. We were joined by 2 women from the Navajo Nation who provided information and responded to questions about Native American life within the PCUSA system. Our execs came back excited about the experience and have taken action to encourage their folk to give to the fund held by the Foundation for the Rehabilitation of the Native American Chapels and Churches throughout our denomination. I also helped, and this goes to what we're talking about today about camps. I helped facilitate, I hate to say this, the sale of Mount Taylor, which is a Presbyterian camp in New Mexico that abuts the Laguna Pueblo and is one of the sacred mountains, 4 sacred mountains of the Native American church, or the Native American people in this country. We sold it to them at a reduced cost to Laguna Pueblo. The property was valued at over $20 million. We sold it to them for $200,000. But there's sin in that. There's sin in that. We should have given it back to them. It was sacred to them. They were in relationship with that land. But we were balancing the people within our synod who all they saw was money, doctrine of discovery in full force, and those who romanticized the camps. Oh, I met my wife.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Oh, we go out there. But those were outside, those are outside relationships. They weren't relationships with the land. And the native people in Laguna were and are in relationship with that land. That's why we should have given it back. But we didn't. Perhaps the project of which I am most proud, and pride is a sin, I guess, but it's something we did, and it amazes me to this day that we did it, is that when COVID hit, the Native American Ministries Coordinating Committee and the MCC said, well, what are we going to do? Our Native people on the reservations were suffering probably more intensely the effects of COVID and the shutdown than any place else, because on the reservations, they usually leave the reservation to do their grocery shopping and go to the local Walmart and do that stuff. They were barred from leaving the reservation. Wow. So where were they to go to get what they needed and to sustain themselves? And so the NAMCC said, well, we have to find a way to feed them. And so we entered into a fundraising project, which actually in church life, and I think it's probably true in your denomination, you don't raise a boatload of money real quick. We raised $490,000 in 6 months. Wow. To facilitate this, and I compare that to the Synod's annual budget. It's only $250,000. Beyond our own budget, we raised almost $500,000. Wow. We delivered 1,200 boxes, which is 6 box sets per family per month for 6 months, which would feed 200 families. In addition, we sent food gift cards to the Laguna Pueblo, who did have grocery stores and things like that on the Pueblo that they didn't have to leave the Pueblo, to provide them the ability to purchase groceries. We distributed the food to Sells, Arizona, which is the Tohono O'odham Nation reservation, Venado, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, Chinle, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, Cayenta, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, Tuba City, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, and Luke, Arizona on the Navajo Nation, as well as Central Presbyterian Church in downtown Phoenix, which is the only urban Native American church in the Presbyterian denomination. Those box sets consisted of 1 large bag of dog food per family. And the first drop that we did, it didn't include dog food. And I guess sort of the elder of the Navajo Nation women, Navajo Nation people, everybody calls, I thought she was related to everybody because everyone calls her auntie. And it was Norma McKay, she's the Word Sacrament. And she called me up and she said, Conrad, you didn't send any dog food. And I said, oh, that's right, they have pets. And she said, no. They don't have pets. They have relatives. And they're part of the rural Native family workforce. We left them out. Didn't leave them out after that. We included large bags of dog food per family, a case of water, a box of face masks at the time, 20-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer, it ended up including 35,000 pounds of food per month. And 175,000 pounds of food distributed over the 6 months period. We had to buy groceries and unbox them, bought them in bulk because everyone it all had to be the same. We couldn't ask people to send us their stuff, to donate food, because then we'd get, a jar of peanut butter that big from Costco. Who the hell needs it? We had to do it right. So there was a lot of food and it had to be unboxed. We had to have volunteers come in COVID, during COVID, unbox all this food and then rebox it and label it so that there was 6 boxes per family unit, and then get it delivered. And we had a company in Arizona that provided the trucks to transport the food every month for free.
Wow.
So the food supplies cost us $250,000, a little over $250,000. We did gift cards, that was another $60,000. We supported the Native American pastors because they no longer, there's only one pastor on the Native, 2 pastors in our synod, Native Americans that have churches. All the rest are CPs, mission pastors that help the churches do their work. We paid their stipends and salaries because they had no money coming into the church. So we paid their stipends and salaries for 6 months. Well, actually, in the case of that, for 8 months. We paid their utilities, which included wood, propane, natural gas, electricity. We paid all of that. It's another had to hire a food distribution manager because I live in Albuquerque and I couldn't travel because of COVID to Arizona. So I did everything on the phone and I had a guy there that watched the volunteers as they packed and unpacked all this food. And then we had other supplies and equipment. So that ended up being $484,000. But in the life of the church, this was a beautiful thing in terms of money raised. We got $250,000 from the National Church, which they had initially earmarked to go to Manal School in Albuquerque. And I said, whoa. And I sit on the board of Manal School. Doing a good thing for Manal, but it's like, no. We have Native American people here who don't have food. Manal School has money. It doesn't need your money. And so a little battle, I enlisted a friend of mine who happened to be on the board of the Presbyterian Mission Agency, a Native American pastor, Judy Wellington. And between us, we convinced the Presbyterian Mission Agency to redesignate that money for this COVID project. We got the synod, my synod I serve, mine, it's not mine, the synod I serve, put in $95,000 above our operating budget. Grand Canyon Presbytery put in $32,000. Presbyterian Santa Fe put in $50,000. We got $52,000 from churches throughout the denomination, sent in money, and we had individual donors from throughout the country who donated $36,000. That came out to $485,000 that was raised. But it was a labor of love on the part of all these people to come together to take care of their siblings. No other way to take care of themselves in the circumstances. And it blew my mind when the Native American Ministries Committee said they wanted to do this, and I'm like, Conrad's, and I'm like, oh, how we can do this? But when there's a need and God knows how to move hearts. Because we're in relationship. This is when this is how we show our relationship to one another. Contrary to the doctrine of discovery. So that essentially is what I want to share with you. But I want to close this quote of a colleague of mine, the Reverend Dr. Eric Litterman, who recently said, and I quote, "Your comfort is purchased with other people's suffering. Your silence is consent.
That's right.
Your inaction is choice." I'm sorry, no questions.
Yeah. Conrad, thank you.
No, brother.
I guess part of what I'd like to hear a little bit more of is talking about your relationship with God. And there's certainly that piece of your family coming into place and being there, and over time. Yes, but also recognize not just the family. We've heard a little bit about, and the movement of place in Laguna, and that land back. Well, we'd like to hear more. People.
I find it interesting because I think that the doctrine of discovery, part of the tool it's made us a society highly mobile, technology, jobs, and all that. And what that does, places. I think that's intentional within that greater discovery system. And it pulls you away, but I see Laguna, sacred mountain, place, it's important, it's part of who they are, it's who they have a relationship with. In my personal circumstances, I live in the same physical location, same house, same that my family has lived in for almost 400 years. So I have a deep relationship than just a place that I own. I own a home. It's a place that I'm part of. And we've done our studies, and you talked about the three sisters. My grandfather, when I was a little boy, grandfather was a general. We had a summer home in Terrace Canyon, which is outside of the city of Albuquerque, outside of the mountains. And he grew crops, not because he was a business, and I didn't know it, but he wanted to teach us. And I know it now. He's an old guy. But then it was like he was trying to teach us that we had a relationship with this earth, and with the things that could grow from it, that sustained us, but that we also tilled it back into the ground. And we did this every summer. He made us farm. Conrad Rocha, the Hilton guy. Not the farmer guy. I learned that relationship. I didn't understand what I was learning. Because I couldn't articulate it. But Grandpa was teaching me something all those years. He would, so it was about time, it was about relationship to the earth, place, and my place in it, and how we fed each other, not just physically, but how we fed each other spiritually with these plants. And he would buy this is a sad story. I don't eat lamb of any kind. Because when I was a little boy, my grandfather every summer would bring a little baby lamb to the mountain. He would say, "This is not a pet. This is food." He was trying to help us understand the concept of food and how we engaged in that relationship, and that we were to love this animal and be in relationship with this animal, but it was not a pet. It's not something we all do. And at the end of the summer, about 3 a.m., he would waken all the kids. You know, my poor grandmother, she was up there in the mountains, 12 grandchildren. Because my mother and my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, they all worked. So grandma had all the kids. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would wake us up. Year after year after year. And we'd go outside and the lamb would be hanging from a tree. He would slit its throat. And Conrad has been traumatized ever since, and he does not eat lamb. But he was teaching us something. But he didn't just slit it. I mean, that sounds kind of bad. He was very respectful about what he did, and he did it quickly. He didn't want this animal to suffer. But he was teaching us that, this animal was now giving back to us. We took care of it. It wasn't something we were going to live with for the rest of our lives, because it wasn't that. Maybe respect that relationship, though it freaked me out. So being in the same place for all these years, for all my life, has helped me understand place and relate to it, and try to help other people relate to it. But I did not understand that concept. I didn't understand the concept of place until we started reading about the concept of place and indigeneity. That is who I am, where I am. I'm not just there, I'm part of it. It's a different relationship that I now understand. I didn't understand, but I understand. Hope that answers your question.
Well, that's it. We call the time conversation, so to speak. Because I think that piece, because I'd love to have the conversation, because I think the land piece is a big piece, and but maybe we can do that over. Other questions?
There's a question online. Larry asked, what Native American language is the Bible translation you reference? And I'm going to do something on Zoom. Up here. Keep on going. I'm good.
There is no common Native American language. Something I learned, during my service. It's in English. It's in English. Language of our native, unlike the Hispanic folks, we have a common language. We have different kind of dialects to it, but it's a common language. Our Native American folks don't have that. So this translation, though, was authored by a sweeping variety of Native American theologians who had input on how it would be worded. the language is English.
It's called the First Nations version, and it's the New Testament, and now there's a separate one with the Psalms.
The Psalms and
I have the New Testament.
there's another part, the Psalms and something else, because I ordered both of them.
Yeah, I have both
They
of
haven't-
them.
Psalms.
they haven't received
Yeah.
them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
It's
Psalms
just-
are-
I have First Nations New Testament.
Yeah,
And I just put the link to it in the chat for the people
okay,
online.
yeah.
Yeah, I have. That's really good.
very cool.
Yes.
Have you heard?
Yeah.
79, yeah.
Other questions? Right.
Well, it's a, I guess it's a comment. You know, as I want to move more in my faith to one of relationships, what you've said has reminded me of the institutional church when moved by people who place such importance on interrelationships with people. You know, it's what you said about the impact that your efforts and the PCUSA's efforts during COVID. It's, you know, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know, at this kind of transitional time where transition is to new understandings is being possible. But, you know, that God works where God works when it's necessary, if we're willing to respond and take our time as we grow into new understandings.
Thank you.
Terry.
I have more of a church governance kind of
Sure.
question, because in our denomination, we don't really have congregations necessarily that identify as Indigenous, and we don't really have a population of Indigenous pastors, but I'm wondering how, is this North American Coordinating Committee that you were talking about that is sort of the facilitation point for communication between the church and your Indigenous congregations? Does it just work through your synods? How does that?
In the Synod I serve, we have the Native American Ministries Coordinating Committee.
Okay, at the synod level.
And the National Church has the Native American Coordinating Committee, NAC.
Okay,
It's more of, and I think Stella knows a lot about it. It's more of an advocacy.
okay.
It advocates for positions and legislation
Gotcha.
in the church about Native American issues. The NAMCC of the Synod is a programmatic
Okay,
entity that does stuff that they want to do.
okay. That's helpful.
Right, and if I'm hearing right, I'm going, you brought up Stella, and Stella was talking about the other day is that, and I think it's coming out locally out of your synod, but a movement towards calling, and if it's successful, that other folks can sign on to, like disciples, of calling the Catholic Church, calling Rome, calling the Pope to more than a repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, but to a call that's more along the lines of saying that the theology to it was wrong to begin with. Therefore, it's not a repudiation, it has to be an elimination of the doctrine of discovery. So I think that is something that is coming out of the Presbyterians, the possibility of it for us to pay attention to. Which I think it becomes the important piece that we talked about the other day. It's the reason for Center for Indigenous Ministries to have the breadth and the welcoming of our siblings of other denominations who have dealt with this much longer than we have. It becomes really important to have those voices in the room on a regular basis. So again, thank you, Conrad. It matters a lot to us to have you here.
Go disciples.
Yeah.